Hello, everyone. He's Jeff.
And he's Michael.
And that's totally corny.
Every second Friday of the month, except this week. It's Wednesday.
How you doing, Michael?
Very good. Good to see you, sir. I love your background.
I think it's pretty cool. It's I love the visual effect of it. So
where is that? Is that in the studio?
Yeah,
at RTB?
Yeah, it's our studio. It's our background we use for a podcast that we do. And so I thought, hey, I can do that too. And it's a little easier to set up than some of the other sets we have. So
perfect. Yeah. Just drape the stars behind you. You're floating out in outer space. Well, good morning. Good to see you. I overheard you chatting with Gina prior to this that you had a couple of your brood completing some schooling and moving on to the next phase in life.
I did. I had my daughter graduated law school. My son graduated college, and so it was exciting times. It's fun to watch the kids grow up and learn to be adults, and I enjoy and don't like this phase of life at the same time. So
I hear you. I totally hear you. I got my middle child is now a senior, starting his senior year, and my youngest is a junior. And how many do you have at home?
I have 2 left at home. So.
And how long until there's none left at home?
So they're both done with at least 1 year of high school. So it's not too many years until they're all out. And my older brother's about 4 years ahead of me in most of these things, and so I kind of get to see what he does in that. And I'm like, oh, that's coming up. All right, no, it's good because I see what I'm wrestling with is natural. It's bad because I see it continues for the next 4 years.
Yep. Well, I want to just say hi to the people in the comment section. People are popping in and saying hi and looking forward to our discussion. So as is usual, I defer to you for topics, and you picked a topic that I actually am very interested in discussing. What are we talking about today, Jeff?
We are talking about assisted reality and virtual reality stuff. And the particular prompt for me thinking about this was somebody sent me a link to Apple does, I know it's like WWDC, and I'm not sure what exactly that stands for, but they're announced in this 2+ hour show that they've got this new assisted reality or augmented reality headset that are coming out, that it's got glasses that go right over your eyes. I mean, it looks like a set of goggles, but it's got lenses so that each of your eyes is seeing something with better than 4K resolution. It's got sound directly over your ears for an immersive sensation. It tracks your eyes to know where you're looking inside, so you can have your computer and your laptop and people all in this visual thing. And from a technical standpoint, I'm looking at this saying, oh, that is too cool for words. And at the same time, I'm thinking, oh, this could cause a lot of harm for people. And so I'm kind of a little conflicted about it, but I know we've talked a little bit about this in the past. And so I thought, hey, this would be fun to go talk about.
Yeah. And so VR, we all know what that means, virtual reality. And you use the term assisted reality for AR, but I've heard it as augmented reality. And I did hear you say that.
No, it is augmented. I just misspoke there. So
okay, so you see, even the astrophysicist makes mistakes every now and then. But so I remember going to Sundance Film Festival several years ago and sitting in a session there where, I intentionally sought out this session that was talking about this subject matter and technology and, the forefront of this technology and where it's going. And they refer to it as XR. So it's the same technology. AR and VR use the exact same technology. And so they combine them and call them XR. So whenever I use XR, but that just means AR and VR. And just for a further explanation for anybody watching is, virtual reality is pretty much when you're completely, you're taken to another world. You're not interacting with this world at all. You put this thing on and the lights go out and whatever comes up, and you are experiencing something completely. You're completely immersed, I guess is the best word, immersed. Augmented reality, however, uses the same technology, yet it's translucent or transparent, or you can walk around in reality, but because of this device, you can see things that anybody else looking at you doesn't see. Like your email prompt can come up and it looks like it's three-dimensional floating out here, and you can, I don't know if the motion sensor technology is there yet, but you could swipe like this, where a person would just think your hand is swiping in the air, but you're actually pushing you're pressing that. And so the motion sensor technology is on its way as well for those kinds of interactions.
Well,
maybe there's handheld devices for video gaming and stuff, but at some point, go ahead.
No, I was saying that is part of this. Is apparently they have 12 cameras that are looking at the environment around you. So if you want to click on something, you just push your fingers together. If you want to swipe, you flick your finger up. It's subtle, and again, there's a part of me, it's like, that is just too cool that there's this ability to sense what's going on and have these very subtle motions be a part of what's going on. And again, the flip side, I'm like, given how phones have they've connected people in that you can now text and be in contact in a way you couldn't. But it's also meant that the people you're present with in the room may not be the people you're present with, which I think is detrimental. And so I see both sides of this. Like I said, there's just this, ooh, this is so cool. And I'm like, oh no, what are we going to do with this at the same time? So
yeah, just like your parents or your grandparents might say, that little box, that little thing you stare at all day when you turn it on, that little square of light in the front of the room, that's like, it's amazing technology, but right?
Yeah.
As new technologies come, generation upon generation, there's the good and the bad that come with it, which emphasizes a fact that I try to emphasize, is it's an instrument, right?
Yes.
Versus, instrumental value versus intrinsic value. Right. So there are things that have value in and of themselves simply because they exist. Like human life has intrinsic value, whereas a hammer, and I was doing Bible every morning and I use the same illustration. A hammer has instrumental value. It's pretty useful as a paperweight, but that's not what it was designed for.
Right.
Right. So what are you afraid of, or what are some of the pitfalls that, any specific pitfalls that come to mind, or just in general?
Well, I mean, I love and agree with your description, is that when I first started thinking about AI and these sorts of things, there was kind of this almost, is this good or bad? And then I realized, that's probably not the right question to ask, because this is just a technology. I mean, I don't talk about, is a hammer good or bad, or is a car good or bad? It's a piece of technology. I think what I see different in things like the XR and the AI is that the power of the tool is so large that now I wonder, how well will we be able to wield it? So, I mean, I don't give my 2-year-old kid a hammer to go around with, because I know they're going to do damage with it because they don't know how to use it. I have no problem giving my high school adult child a hammer and saying, hey, go do this, because they've got the strength, they've got enough maturity to know, hey, you don't just swing this around. They recognize the consequences and they can do better with it. And I think my question is not so much about the technology, because I mean, there is just this fascination with it. It's much more about, who are we as a people and how are we going to use it? Because this is powerful enough, you can do great good with it, but you can also do great evil with it. And that's the part that concerns me. Yes,
I agreed wholeheartedly. But I've seen this coming for a while. I mean, I know a lot of people have seen this coming for a while, and I have, me, a creative, like guy who works in Hollywood, always wheels are turning, and so I have been in development on not just entertainment, movies, TV show kind of stuff, but recognizing that this is the future, that this is something that will be as ubiquitous as a cell phone. I think it will be as common as a cell phone at some point on the near horizon. That the technology is rapidly getting there, and the cost point will come down, and so I've been in development on products, right? You know, you can produce a TV show, which is content, but you can also produce environments, right? And that's what this that takes it from a flat screen to a fully immersive three-dimensional experience, or four-dimensional, because it's over, you can tell stories over time, right? So I have a number of products that you know, the reason I've allowed my imagination to go that far to think that I could possibly even, you know, create my own device, not just the content, but the device itself, is because of the big project that I'm working on. And if, you know, so I'm like, okay, if that big project goes and the funding comes through and it's profitable, then I'm absolutely going to focus on XR content, XR. And I said this to my son probably 5 or 6 years ago. I picked up the cell phone and I go, all right, I got to communicate something to you. Think about this as the horse and carriage, right? This thing that is a supercomputer in everybody's pocket, right? Access to the world, access to the universe. Think of this as the horse and carriage. There's a thing coming, a wearable tech that's going to be the car, right? So what happened to the horse and carriage? There's still horse and carriages out there. They still have function. They still have use in certain capacities, but they've been primarily, majorly supplanted by automotion, automobile. And so what we're talking about, I believe, is that revolutionary. I believe it will be that revolutionary. I think it will have business application. I believe when, and let me get this point across, and then I'm going to throw it back to you. One of the things about human interaction that makes these flat screens somewhat useful, you know, more useful than maybe we thought. You know, I can see your face and I can see, it's the efficiency of communication, right? It's not just your words typed on a screen. And like the inflection, I don't know. And then when I hear you, I hear inflection, but even more so, more efficiently, your inflection and your gesticulation and your body language it makes communication far more efficient. And so the virtual environment will enhance communication, and you can be a businessman and go down to the corner XR offices and step into a room and be in a room with people all over the planet instantly. Like you can step into a room and be in the same room with people that are on the other side of the country or on the other side of the planet, and your body language will be instantly readable, and so the communication will be efficient, and it'll save money on air travel, so you don't have to go there.
No, and I agree wholeheartedly. That's one of the, you know, just of various things we've studied. But I was going through a book, and one of the comments that was made in the book is that we're designed for face-to-face contact. And so even though we were doing all this Zoom, which you think about it, Zoom is what the Jetsons were talking about 40 years ago, and we're now there. And now that we use it, it's like, okay, it's good, but it's not. If you've ever been in a Zoom meeting, it's just not nearly as effective as we're sitting in a room meeting. And I think part of that is that it's very flat, one-dimensional. And even though you still get the articulation, the gestures, and everything, it's a whole lot more efficient at communicating information. There's something missing in the relationship there. And I think with the XR stuff, there's a new level of even being able to communicate better. And I think that's good. What I want to think about how to do is, how do you make sure that while we're doing that, we also make sure the relationships are being built? Because one of the things I've noticed, and I'll take social media and phones, that's one of these revolutionary technologies, is that it would be very easy to get caught up in, I have 500 friends, and interact with each of them online, as opposed to, I have the 3 friends that we go out and we watch movies and we hug each other and we slap each other and we wrestle, and you're missing all of that. You're spreading out your relational contact over a whole bunch of people and having shallow relationships instead of those deep ones that we really need to have, so that somebody knows you and actually accepts you regardless of who you are, which is what ultimately the gospel is about, that Christ knows us deeply. And, so that's where I think you can do both. It just requires a maturity to do both.
Yes, and I mean, we talk about regulation, right? And when we fear the downside of things, and so we tend to react and want
Mhm.
to overregulate, or the government steps in, Big Brother. Somebody out there knows what's right and wrong, and is going to impose their morality upon us, and we've got to follow their strictures or whatever, right? And that's inevitable. Except technology tends to move faster than the legislation or whatever, and so there will be this time of rapid development, and people will use it for evil. Obviously, people, and one thing about being human is, in the virtual environment, you can actually psychologically lose touch with reality,
Mhm.
right? You can get so immersed with mental health. People can completely lose contact with what's real, and so it can be used
Right.
in the most insidious ways. And it is. I imagine it's already being used by
Mhm.
unscrupulous actors to destroy people's lives, but that can't be the deterrent from developing it for its positive, or it's good, right? It's instrumental good uses, because God is the creator of all things. It's humans that corrupt it and destroy. And so one, like, I'm glad you brought in the most important fact, what Jesus wants us to do. And Jesus modeled what you're talking about, those intimate relationships. I mean, he was
Mhm.
talking to thousands of people regularly. When his public ministry started, he couldn't even go into cities. I mean, that's one of the reasons he's like, don't tell anybody I healed you, or whatever. Don't
Yeah.
tell anybody, because he couldn't even go into cities, because once they'd hear he's coming, the crowds would mass around him. And so he was
Right.
always, but then on a regular basis, he would go up on a high mountain, or as it says, he would regularly go. And sometimes he would take his closest friends with him, right? So he's got
Mhm.
the thousands that mass around him, and then he's got the 500 loyal followers, and then he's got the 70, and then he's got the 12, and then he's got the 3, and then he's got the 1, right? John was
Mhm.
his like best friend, and it's like he spent quality time with those people.
Mhm.
He did not neglect them. And so that's the important thing to keep in mind. But on that note, I think that's also something that this technology will enable, that more and more people can have the immersive spiritual experience. You can be in church with some amazing speaker who would normally be an itinerant evangelist traveling the world. Well, you can jump in to a sermon, like somebody preaching a powerful message, no matter what time or where they are. If they're in a room that has the technology and you have your technology, you can hear the gospel message in a way you've never heard it before. You don't have to be in the back of the room. You can come up close and see the passion on this preacher, right? Those are the things that this technology will enable more and more people to hear the gospel in earnest.
So, I'm just curious because that I see there's a value in, there's certain people who, just as I've read the language they use, it just resonates. And like, I would love to hear A.W. Tozer preach a sermon, or I mean, they're just people who are gifted, communicate, or articulate, know well. Now I can engage that. It does seem like, though, that if we're not careful, God puts us in a local congregation for a reason. And there's this balance between, do I go sit in this church where the AI is A.W. Tozer speaking and interacting, or do I go interact with the messy stuff of the people who bother me, who live around me, so that we learn how to live in community in spite of the fact that I'm highly rational in the way I think, and this person is more creative in the way they think, and they just bug me. And yet God says, love them anyway. It's like, even in a marriage, it's like, I find it amazing how many times God puts two very different people, because it's easy to get along with someone who's a lot like you. But
Yeah.
when there's this other person, it's like, oh, now we both grow. And so I get there's a teaching and a depth of learning, yes. And it seems like there's this promise that can come, and there's this peril that's there in every situation. And so, is that really a good thing that we all go virtual church or do that?
Well, actually, I'm so glad you went in that direction, because I try to constantly, because it happens right now, right? I mean, people sit at home and click on their favorite preacher and just sit and watch or listen and completely
Right.
neglect the fellowship. And I try to always
Mhm.
emphasize, if you are not in a local body with other believers, no matter what you think of them, you are disobeying God, right? You are actually in sin if you are not involved in fellowship with others physically. And so I go to a church that I don't go there for the preaching, and I don't go there for, I go there for the fellowship. And I mean, I am so grateful for YouTube has brought me. I have a couple of teachers that I've come across in the
Mhm.
past year or so. That's like, I can binge consume good, solid teaching and feed myself,
Right.
but that does not replace the full Christian experience, which is sacrificing for others, going and taking lunch. Our church happens to deliver lunches to the homeless in the park, right? So on occasion, like it is incumbent upon me to go and serve others. So I go to my church for my family to have connection there, and so that we know that we're part of something larger, tangibly, physically. But
Mhm.
but that same thing needs to be emphasized, right? It needs to be emphasized, and it's there's the convenience of where I'm going away on a trip, and now I can zoom in to my home church on
Right.
Zoom or whatever. But it should not replace that aspect of our lives, and that's you can
Mhm.
abuse anything, and that's one of the abuses. But it's
Yeah.
you make a great point.
Well, and that's, kind of, when I first started thinking about this, again, AI, augmented reality, virtual reality, it's like it was focused on the technology. And now I'm more thinking this isn't about the technology, it's about what kind of people are we becoming? Because it struck me, if you try and regulate something, I know enough of myself that where the rules are there, sometimes the rules are like, yes, that helps me know. And other times it's like, well, how can I get around these to do what I want? And so it's who I am as a person that dictates whether I'm going to use this well or not. If I am about building relationships and loving God and serving others, the technology that comes in is going to facilitate me doing that. And if I am about pleasing myself and getting what I can and being isolated, the technology is going to help me do that. And so the question is not, I agree with you, there's an era of inevitability about these sorts of things, whether it's XR, whether it's something else, there's going to be new technology that is disruptive in that sense. Who am I becoming so that when it comes, I use it well? And how am I helping the people around me become people who, when it comes, we will use it well?
Yeah, it's. And I was making this point in Bible Every Morning this morning that Hollywood, there's two schools of thought, especially in the church, about Hollywood. It's one view is it's satanic, have nothing to do with it, flee, run away. Right? Hollywood is evil, don't have anything to do with it. And the other school of thought is it's a tool that has been
Mhm.
abused. There are people that abuse it, and there are people that use it for good. And so this is that same thing. Like, because it can be used for evil doesn't mean it should be squashed and terminated and it's all evil, and
Okay.
it's sending the human species into a death spiral. I don't believe that at all. I believe God created us to be creative, like created us in his image. He's a creator. We're creators. We're creative. It's an inevitability. And if you, as a moral person, make prohibitions against developing this technology, all you're doing is seeding the ground to those who will develop it for evil. Right? If you, as a good person, say, we're not going to do this, we're not going to do that, the evil people will still do it, and they'll have the most powerful toys and tools and use them for evil, and the good people will be left in the dust. Right? And so we
Mhm.
have to be at the forefront of technology, making sure that it is used and demonstrably in the right way. And so
Mhm.
I think it's our duty to be on the forefront of technology. Just like you, as an astrophysicist, you're on the forefront of researching what you're doing as a believer, right? If it was only atheists and pagans that were doing that, we wouldn't really have we wouldn't have reasons to believe, right? We wouldn't have the knowledge of, like, I think you are chosen by God to put this information in perspective, right? It's like, you know, this secular mindset, when you go with a secular framework, you are inherently limited in how you can interpret the data, right? The facts. But if you have like your mindset, you see things from a different perspective. I mean, that's what I gather from reading a lot of apologetic materials. Is it's like, man, these secularists don't realize how much amazing stuff they're missing by having the wrong paradigm, I guess. Does that make sense?
No, that's an interesting point. And, part of, I loved your description about is Hollywood evil or is it good? And because without going into the details, I kind of, for a while, I had this kind of, Hollywood's just, it's evil. It'd be kind of nice if maybe we just lost California off, the San Andreas fell off and we got rid of it. The world would be better. And then I moved to California and ended up in Sunday school classes with people who are illustrators and producers. And I'm like, oh, there are people in this realm trying to do exactly what I'm trying to do in my arena. And it's like, okay, so there's got to be a better or a different way to think about that. And I love what you're saying. It's like, okay, there are people who are going to do this. Let's be involved in that. Now, that there's obviously a little bit of, okay, you got to be careful how you do that, because there are people who say, okay, well, pornography, we need to be involved in that. So there's some things that are, there's obviously a limit to that argument. But when it comes to a technology like this, and this, I'll just be candid with you, I struggle with this because I see what's going on in social media that tends to draw people away from relationships. And so do I want to engage social media because I know that if I do that, people will be drawn in and have problems with it? I wrestle with, is that good for me to be on social media? The flip side is, if I'm not there, other people are there providing content, and those people are probably going to engage social media anyway. So by me being there, I can actually provide value to some where it wouldn't be there if I'm not there, type thing. So I get it's not this easy, clean, cut and dry thing. It requires a bit of maturity to think about well, and as I've come to conclude.
Yeah, there's a few examples that I want to point to that, it feels like even though there's good and evil in Hollywood, it just feels like the evil is prevailing, right? It feels like the most the richest or the most influential producers or studios or whatever are just creating destructive content that's not wholesome and building up of culture. But there are signs that show that for example, and I always refer to this, the Passion of the Christ, I think, was a seminal moment in entertainment, right? It was probably the most accurate, as far as on-screen depiction of the most important event in history, right? We finally had the most, detail accurate depiction of the most important event in history, and it shattered box office records. It was the highest grossing R-rated film in history for a long time. It's been surpassed by like two other movies since then, but it shattered records, and then there's a show called The Chosen that is really, really popular. And whether you like it or not for whatever reason, but it's showing that the demand is there. And I think a time is coming. I honestly think a time is coming when those who are wanting the right kind of content will actually dominate, that will assume control of the reins, right? And that the evil will diminish, because something that can't continue won't continue. It's a principle. The self-destructive nature is self-destructive. We call it self-destructive for a reason. I think it's going to dwindle and destroy itself, and wholesomeness will remain, because it has for 2,000 years, right?
I do.
Anyway, we're almost out of time. I'm going to hand it off to you for the rest of this.
I agree with you in general. This may be another topic for discuss. I think some of that depends on your eschatology of who will diminish and how will it play out. Because I think evil can be very powerful. And I mean, you just look at Nazi Germany. It got very powerful. Ultimately, it failed, but there was a lot of damage that was done in the process. So there's a lot of good theology to talk about in that sort of discussion. So,
and we have 20 seconds left, and we've opened a can of worms. maybe we'll this will be our topic for next time to be continued. Good to see you, my friend.
Agreed.
Got a
Good
lot
to
of
see you.
but I gotta get to work here in a second, but love you and look forward to this all the time. God is in control, everyone.